Running a Formula One team is a tough business. Many have tried and even more have failed. Out of the 171 teams that have entered the sport, only 15 of them have actually won a world title. And as of 2021, there are only 3 teams, McLaren, Ferrari and Williams, that have been in the sport for more than 20 years. So basically, Formula One is one of the toughest sports in the world to enter and take part in. But it's even harder to actually survive and remain in Formula One. And that is because of one thing and one thing only: money. As I've explained in detail in many other videos, money is absolutely crucial to starting an F1 team, and even more important if you want to enjoy a bit of success in the sport as well. And as is the expensive nature of Formula One, if you don't have enough money to support the team season to season, the team will go bankrupt. And we've seen this happen again and again and again in the history of Formula One, with the most recent team to go into administration being Force India in 2018. But before I dive into why so many teams go bankrupt, let me just explain what bankruptcy actually is. Well, bankruptcy is basically when you run out of money and can no longer pay your debts, whether that be employee salaries or loans from the bank. And what happens is someone from a third party comes in, usually called an administrator, and assesses what to do with the business. Firstly, they see how much the business owes various people, then sells off company assets such as buildings, raw materials, etc. to pay them back. Then they assess whether the business should be liquidated, which means the company will no longer be active, or whether it should be given to new management. In the case of Force India, the administrators found new management rather than liquidated the team. This is when Lawrence Stroll bought the team off of Vijay Mallya. Usually in the business world, companies are liquidated because the management have run it into the ground so much that there's no value remaining. But in Formula One, it's more common to sell the team to new management. But in some cases, F1 teams do also go into liquidation, such as Caterham in 2014. But why do Formula One teams fall into bankruptcy more often than not? Well, it's partly because of the basic economic principle of a Formula One team. But what do I mean by this? Well, in an everyday business, the main aim is to make a profit, or in other words, earn more than you spend. However, in Formula One, if you're making a profit, then it shows you still have money to spend on the performance of the car. You see, rather than make a profit, Formula One team owners make their money by buying or starting a team, then have them improve and become more valuable so that when they come to sell the team, they can sell it for much more than they originally bought it for. And well, this model naturally leads to financial struggle, as consistent profits are quite important to keep a company safe from going under. But this only makes F1 teams susceptible to going bankrupt. To actually go bankrupt, you need something else to go wrong. So let's dive into the many ways that can happen. Well, looking back over the decades of Formula One and the various ways in which F1 teams have gone bankrupt, I found there are 4 main reasons: economic crisis, management, performance, and business model. But let's start with economic crisis. Well, as it says on the title, when the world economy is doing particularly badly, it means various major global car brands also begin to struggle financially as well. And so, to explain this properly, let's put ourselves in the shoes of Honda Racing. No, not the guys that supply Red Bull with race-winning engines, but rather the guys back in 2008 that had their own team. They were by no means performing amazingly well, but when the global economic crisis of 2008 came about, the Japanese economy, and Honda, was hit especially hard. And so the glamorous and expensive playground of Formula One was no longer financially logical for Honda, and so at the end of 2008 they pulled out of the sport. The crisis hit Formula One so bad that BMW, Toyota and Super Aguri all pulled out either that same year or in 2009. So, economic crises 1. Next up is the management, or rather how bad the management is. This is basically when the management of the team, or more specifically the accountants and financial officers, get the numbers a bit wrong and end up throwing the team into financial hardship. Well, this is exactly what happened to the most recent victim of F1 bankruptcies, Force India. In essence, what went wrong with Force India was they owed lots of people lots of money, £28.7 million to over 450 different companies to be exact. And well, that's a recipe for bankruptcy. Now, while it was poor money management that led Force India to go into administration, as I'll explain, their general business model meant they were doomed to fail. Basically, what I mean by this is Force India was a private team owned by a man called Vijay Mallya, And the issue with private teams is they generally struggle to find sufficient investment for the team, whereas F1 teams like Mercedes or Ferrari are owned by Mercedes or Ferrari. So these teams always have a fallback in regards to investment for the team, because the parent company can increase investment if they see fit, whereas private teams rely on outside investment to help the team. So naturally, these guys are the ones that end up going bankrupt. We even saw a case of this almost play out in front of our very eyes last season. I'm talking about Williams. Now at the time, Williams was a private team ran and owned by the Williams family, and as we could see, they were really struggling to find enough funding to keep the team afloat. And so on the 21st of August 2020, Williams F1 was sold to a US private equity firm called Doralton Capital. Now, if Williams never chose to sell the team, they would have almost definitely gone into bankruptcy, simply because they were not receiving enough outside investment. Now, this next one isn't always going to cause a team to go bankrupt, but it's a common step in the wrong direction for teams that do in fact go under. And that is the fact the team is performing very badly on the track. We've seen it before with Caterham, HRT, Prost, and almost Williams as well. Basically, how F1 works is if you finish lower in the standings, you receive less prize money. F1 is after all a meritocracy, and so if you receive less prize money, then you have less money to spend on the team. Now, in the case of Mercedes or Ferrari, if the team is doing badly, the parent company can just pump in more money. However, with private teams, there is no one to do that, and so it's a snowball effect. You finish lower in the table, get less prize money, spend less on performance, finish lower in the table, get less prize money. You get the idea. Right, so economic crisis, poor management of finances, bad business model, and a lack of performance are all bound to land an F1 team in some serious trouble. So which F1 teams are at danger of going bankrupt at the moment? Well, as I mentioned, Williams was very close, but now with Doralton Capital, I'd say they are going to be alright for the time being. So if I was to choose one team to go bust, it would have to be Haas. If next year when the regulations come in they are still one of the slowest teams, then I would not be surprised if the team is either sold completely, most likely to Dmitry Mazepin, or liquidated altogether. The expensive nature of modern Formula 1 means private teams simply can't survive alongside the global motoring behemoths of Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, etc. etc. The days of the 1990s where you'd have two teams virtually go bankrupt every season are well and truly behind us. So it's quite likely bankruptcies in F1 will no longer occur in the same way. Who knows? Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments section below if you think Haas will be the next victim of bankruptcy, and as always, make sure to like, subscribe, and smash that notification bell to be reminded of any new videos.